Often with programming, we learn to use assessments to help plan our program, but we can also miss the big picture. It is so important to implement practical ABA programs for our learners. Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna. We're behavior analysts that create weekly content about how to teach children with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about practical ABA programs. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
So, with my kids being in high school, they are often asking me to proofread their essays. Some of them are better than others at writing essays, and I'm happy to help, even though I try not to write too much of it for them. And an example of what we're talking about in terms of ABA programming would be as if my child would ask me to proofread their essay, and I am also a little bit obsessed with grammar. So, if I would just look for their grammar mistakes and their spelling errors, well, yeah, that's important. I might miss the whole point and anything else that might be missing. Maybe the paragraph didn't even make sense, or maybe the essay wasn't answering the question that was asked. And so sometimes focusing too much on the details, you're really missing the big picture. And if we're not going to do that, in this example or in our regular lives, it's important to apply that also to our ABA programming.
Kids are multifaceted and multidimensional. And when we're looking at ABA assessments, it's great. We definitely need to do assessments as ABA professionals, but then looking at those assessments and saying, yeah, you know what, I'm going to program to this missing box, or I'm going to program because they don't have this on the assessment, really takes our multidimensional kids and makes them 2D. And it makes it cookie cutter. And we are not like that. We shouldn't be doing cookie cutter programs.
And often it's because, like, when we go through our coursework and the task list, we're learning a lot about like principles and theory of ABA, which is super important. And depending on what your placement was or where you were getting your supervision hours, you may or may not have gotten real good experience. And so sometimes we get into a job where all of a sudden we're working, with a kid with autism, and we may not have really learned how to write programs. So we start to rely a little bit too much on those assessments that have become really common in ABA. And yeah, they're super helpful, and we'll use a lot of them. For more information on how to pick which assessment for your learner, you should go check out our other podcast episode on assessments. And they're super helpful, and we should use them. But sometimes we weren't really trained properly in how to take that information from an assessment and translate it into a program that's really meaningful for our learners and that doesn't get too caught up in the details. So what does that mean to get too caught up in the details?
Well, let's take something like feature function class, which I'm sure most behavior analysts have taught at least once or twice in their lifetime. And when I say once or twice, I probably mean 2 or 3 million times, right? Anyways, when you teach feature function class to an individual who is, say, 4 years old, and who's acquiring language very quickly, you're teaching, and hopefully you're teaching across operands. So you're not just saying, point to the something that you bounce and they pointing to ball, point to something you did, and you just go through all receptively. And then eventually you get to expressive, and then you can ask. Eventually you say, what is something you bounce? And they can say ball. You want to be teaching dynamically. So you want to be saying, show me something that you bounce. A ball, great job, you bounce a ball. Hey, what do you bounce? You're right, you bounce a ball. Maybe then hide the picture behind your back and say, tell me again, what do you bounce? So you're teaching across operants, you're teaching receptive, you're teaching expressive, and you're teaching interverbal all at once.
And the challenge with some of the assessments is that they separate out all of those components. So an assessment would only look at their ability to request, separate from their ability to label, separate from their ability to answer a question. And it gets very nitty gritty, right? You might be looking at an assessment where, the difference between being able to have 5 labels versus 100 labels, and that difference might take you months of teaching. And so you're to fill in one box of that assessment might take you 2 months to teach them 20 more labels. And it gets really, really intricate in terms of being able to fill in more of those boxes on the assessment. And so that's what we mean by like really getting caught up in the details.
The other thing too is that when we're teaching feature function class, we could be, really skilled, we could be teaching across operants. But if you're teaching a 4-year-old who's acquiring language fairly quickly and they're moving through these programs and on to the next one and on to the next one, that's one thing. But what if you have an 8-year-old who's still learning feature function class and they've been learning feature function class since they were 3? Like, what do you do then if a program's moving really slowly, but they still haven't learned specific questions related to feature function class? Or an 11 or 12-year-old, if they still can't answer feature function class, do you implement feature function class at that point in time? And our argument would be, well, if they're learning it for a long time and it's really slow to acquire, then maybe we need to look at something else and do something else first, or start looking step away from the program and look at the big picture and say, okay, first of all, if your child isn't talking right now, is it because I have too many receptive programs in the child's programming, or is it something else? Sometimes, if I've got a child who really, maybe had some expressive language, but, is not necessarily losing it, but not acquiring more expressive language, or the fact that they're just not acquiring a lot of expressive language to begin with, I can step back and I can look at the program and go, wow, they've actually got a lot of receptive programs in their program and they're not really doing much expressive. So at that point in time, my instruction is make sure you're teaching across operants and make sure you're adding in that expressive component to even any of those receptive programs. Follow up with expressive, follow up with expressive, follow up with expressive every single time. And then for that 8-year-old or that 12-year-old who really is acquiring feature function class, that's when we need to step back and look at the big picture. So I'm no longer editing essays for grammar at this point in time. I want to see if the content itself is still relevant.
So more important than updating an assessment every couple months, which is what we often do, which even then you're only getting like 6 months at a time. It is our job as BCBAs who oversee program to be able to take that step back and really see the big picture and be able to track progress and monitor progress while also always keeping in mind those long-term goals. One of the ways that we do that is through our intake assessment checklist and program planning matrix, which we have available in our free membership. What we would do in addition, or when we're just starting out with a learner, in addition to an assessment, is we have a checklist that we go through, which is like really easy. It doesn't take 2 or 3 weeks to go through like a lot of detailed boxes on an assessment, but it gives you a good picture of what skills they have and what skills they might be struggling with. And from there, we fill in a program planning matrix. So this is what Shana was saying, by being able to look at all of their programs at a glance and say, is it very heavy on the receptive skills? Is it very heavy on academics or gross motor? Or do they need more variety or more expressive language programs? And by being able to do something like that, in addition to an assessment every couple of months or so, you'll be able to see where the gaps might be. And then also talking to parents, incorporating some of their goals, having conversations about where does this learner need to be in 2 years from now and 5 years from now? Is the goal really for them to be able to label 100, unknown items, or is the goal for them to be able to like ask for a drink when they need it? And so really having those conversations about imagining what's going to be a useful skill based on this snapshot that we now have, which honestly, an assessment snapshot is usually meaningless to a parent. So we need to put that into different contexts about what's really going to be meaningful, picking those longer term goals. And what we do best is taking large goals and breaking them down into smaller goals so that they are more, we can accomplish them within a smaller time frame. And that's really how we write programs, is we think about what this child needs to learn, where they need to be, and how we can break that down into smaller steps that are really attainable. And those smaller steps will always be more dynamic and more flexible and really teach across operants and be really natural.
And when you're also looking at assessments, they don't really tell you what a child likes. I know you can do a preference assessment, but that's also in the moment. But if I really know that this kid is really good at, I don't know, organizing, for instance, Shira says, look, 5 to 10 years down the road, and what kinds of things can I put in place to capture that strength that might become a potential job opportunity? Or if I know that a student really doesn't like this? What else can I do? So that either they learn to like it, or you know what, it's just not for them. Let's stay away from that, but let's teach to this instead. I've got one learner, for instance, who absolutely loves playing with dolls, and she's so great. She sets up these things and she watches videos and acts them out with her dolls. Well, we've now incorporated that into her programming, and she's having a tough time, funny enough, with feature function class. It's still functional for her though. So we actually ask her LOL dolls about feature function class, and her LOL dolls answer. And now she's learning it because of the LOL dolls. And it's really kind of cool. And she's acting out stories and getting into some complex WH questions and reading comprehension, all because we've incorporated what she likes into the therapy as well.
Right. Kids have so much more going on when you think about what their home life is like, what their school, what their ultimate, long-term goals are, their personality. And we need to think about those things when we're program planning, because that will make the learning a lot more real and able to generalize.
So we have an upcoming CEU next month, and I'm really excited about it because we're going to be taking a look at some sample assessments and sample profiles of kids. And then we're actually going to be doing some breakout sessions and going over and talking about how do we plan for these learners. So it's going to be kind of a roll up the sleeves and real practical way of doing this. So learning that program planning in a very practical, unique format.
Yeah, at our membership, we offer a lot of our programs that are already written and templated and anyone can use them. But we get a lot of requests from our members as to like, how did you get to this? Or can we do this together? Workshop style. And so we're really excited to be able to, do it together so that we can break it down for you guys who are coming, not just for our learners, but how we go through that process of assessment to program plan and then writing that program. So it's going to be really hands-on and really practical, which we love.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. For more information on practical ABA programs, click the link in and around this video or in the description to join us on Thursday, February 22nd for our CEU event, Programming for Progress. We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future videos, and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.